Welcome to the Seoul Patch Podcast, the podcast where three American expats explore different topics related to living and working in South Korea. With a combined 50 years of living experience in Asia, there are plenty of stories to tell. So, pop in your AirPods and make yourself comfortable. It's time for the Seoul Patch Podcast.
So today today I thought I would talk about shamanism with you guys because it's something that is actually has more influence on the culture in Korea than maybe I first realized. Because I don't know what your experience with it is, but Kevin, you said you watched a couple of YouTube videos like from Vice News about Korean shamanism.
Yeah, one Vice, one something else, just really basic. Like one of them was talking, they were both talking to a shaman. And just asking like really quick questions. One of them was a little bit longer, and they were just kind of explaining like, how does one get into it? What is involved in shamanism? And one of them showed an example, and you mentioned the pig just a second ago. One of them showed an example of like some ritual that they were doing with like a pig
and a cow. They'll do like a whole cow too. Like that.
I didn't see that one, but
yeah. Those are like those are pretty expensive too. My understanding is like those really big. Well, I'll get onto it later, but it's called a goot, I believe. A goot is
I know that word. Yeah,
the ritual. So it's got that like it ends with that like S. You know how sometimes when in Korean,
the shiot.
Yeah, shiot. If you end in shiot, it has a T sound, right?
Right.
Okay, so it's like a goot, like GOOT kind of pronunciation, and that's those are the rituals that they do, but. I'll get into the different kinds of rituals a little bit later, but if it's like a full animal, it'll be quite expensive. Those are, like a new building or something like that. They might hire a shaman to do a ritual.
So is shamanism the only thing that I've seen really, and I'm sure you guys have seen it as well, is sometimes when a new restaurant opens, I've often seen like a pig's head kind of in front of the restaurant or whatever. I guess, is that probably part of it?
It could be. It very well could be. There's so many different features depending on where you are in Korea that are like different kinds of shamanism. And so I'll go into like the different, like how you become a shaman. It's different north of the Han River and south of the Han River. It's actually kind of divided into two. And then Jeju's got
even in Seoul.
Jeju has a whole thing going on that's totally different. That's just bananas.
That's
like
it's great. So cool. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'll just jump into it here a little bit, and also some of the origin stories, the myths behind shamanism are really interesting. So it's prehistoric. 1000 BC is what I came across in my in the literature, like how long it's been around. It's older than maybe Korea itself, like there was some form of shamanism before it even whatever we call Korea, and it had a large influence. It's had a huge influence on the culture, so much so that even in North Korea, I think I read a number that even like even at this day, like 15 to 20% of people still practice some form of shamanism up there, even though I think they tried to eradicate religion from the culture in North Korea, but it still lingers in some respects there. I'm
really
South
curious
Korea,
to know if there's going to be any specific like cultural things that we're going to see, because you mentioned that this is really old, 1000 BCE, like 3000 years ago.
Yeah.
And because Korea is such a Confucian culture, of course. Yes. And obviously that's much more recent, although I don't know when Confucius was writing actually. Do either of you guys have any idea on that offhand?
More than
I don't.
2000?
I'd have to look it up.
No
but it's
idea.
Got to be like over 1,000 years ago, right? I mean, it's got to be like.
So I mean, that's pretty much supplanted shamanism, but shamanism is still out there. So I'm curious what even more underlying things in the culture there are. Just in general.
Here's the thing: is that shamanism is kind of. It's kind of interesting in the way that like the way I kind of compared it was to kind of think of it like almost like a language, like a language will not be like English is not the same. Modern English is not the same as Old English, right? Like there's it has this metamorphosis where it just changes. I think shamanism is some people will call it a primitive language. I actually think I wouldn't use the word primitive to describe it. I actually think it's quite interesting and relevant to the culture in that I think it kind of absorbed some of like Confucian practices or thoughts and Buddhism, and it kind of moves with the culture. So it's
That's
not
actually
the
something
same.
else that I was curious about, is how connected it is with Buddhism itself, because it seems to have some connections with the rites with Buddhist things here.
Absolutely, because what a shaman is, and I'll just get into this a little bit here. So let's start at the beginning. So you have let's define terms here a little bit. So musok is what I'm going to use to describe shamanism. That now a musok in is a shaman, but there's another name that I think is more common and a more modern name, which is Mudang. Mudang. Yeah. So a Mudang is a female shaman, and I believe a Sana Mudang is a male shaman.
The one video that I saw, actually, it was with a male shaman, and they were only using the word Mudang with him. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think for all intents and purposes, I think we can just say Mudang is a shaman and Musok is shamanism. We'll use that as like the religious practice. And the practice is that it believes that there is a spirit in it's animistic religion. So there's a spirit in everything, like a rock, an animal, a tree, a mountain. They all have their own. They all have spirits. And what a shaman is basically an intermediary between the spirit world and the earthly world. And now, where I would say it probably connects with Buddhism is that a shaman, and now there's a couple of different types of musok practice, but we'll start with the first one, which is we'll call it let me see here, nadim, a nadim mudang. So a nadim is the if you go north of the Han River, this is a nadim mudang is somebody who received a message from the spirit's world and became sick, and the sickness is called Shinbong. It's like the divine sickness or spiritual sickness, where they actually become ill and they need to participate in a ritual where after that, when that ritual is performed, this person now becomes a mudang. So
yeah, and this actually is like the only thing I know about this topic, what you're talking about right now.
Yeah.
Because in the hour before the podcast, I was having dinner with my girlfriend and I said, hey, we're talking about shamanism. You know, I'm interested in Buddhism and religion and these things. And I've spent a little bit of time with it, but I don't know anything specifically about this, but I know like your mother does things with shamanism. I know she also has some practices, I guess you call it, more than a belief. It's more of a practice.
Exactly.
That are not strictly Buddhist. And so I had asked her if she could enlighten me on anything. And that's the one thing she thought was the most interesting. She's like, you probably don't know about the Shinerim and Mudang like dynamics. So, and this is not like just what Jack's describing isn't just some esoteric historical thing. Like, this is like contemporary Koreans, like young people. This is not lost. So the way she described it was that
Brian, you just said Shinnerim. Yeah, but we hadn't defined that yet, and I had to look it up. That's a possessed shaman.
Yeah, exactly. So the way, this is just what she told me. So Shinnerim, she refers to as like the spirit. So you might be getting like a definition, I don't know from where, but the way she just described it was Mudang is the shaman, and you don't know that you're a shaman. You don't decide you want to be one. You're not born one. It's not a caste thing. It happens to you. So the Shinnerim is the spirit that is coming to you. So you find that you could be a medium, and you can reject it. You can reject it, which obviously would be somewhat popular thing to do, as popular as accepting it. And she was describing a friend who has rejected it and has to go to the sauna routinely because her friend gets sick routinely. And this is what they attribute it to. Another acquaintance was like the opposite. He, in a very early age, I think he was 8 or 9 years old, he had the Shinnerim experience and he laid into it. So he spent his early childhood studying the
rituals.
methodology and the history of ritual. And now he's a Mudang, and he's very committed, and he's very respected. That's the beginning and the end of everything that I know. Is just that
well, no, that's awesome. That's exactly what I was going to talk about, because I Shinmyang could be probably translated to like divine light. So imagine there's like a divine light that has basically entered the Mudang's body before they know they're Mudang. It's like you're a Jedi, you know? It's like you don't know, you haven't had the training, you don't know, but you just get the Shinbyang, which is like the message, the signal, and then you have to answer it, or you could reject it, like your friend or friend of your girlfriend's who's just said, I'm not going to do this, or I'm not ready yet, or is this really Shinbyang? Like, you know, like that's the question that the Mudang has to answer. In the case of the article that I read, there was an interview with a woman, I can't remember what her name is, but she was a Mudang, and she felt the Shinbyang, but nobody believed her. So it was like, so it took her some time to find a Mudang that was willing to perform the ritual, the gut, that would accept her into the Mudang world. So it also works the other way, where, you know, people are being pushed in, and some people are being, you know, believe they're being called to do it, but actually you have to find a Mudang that will say, yeah, that's Shinbyang. Because, you know, some of them are like, no, I don't think that is. I think you're just, you're sick, or, you know, I don't know. The other thing I remember seeing, which was kind of disturbing, was there was like a documentary. Oh, actually, there was like a Korean, like I want to call it reality TV show, but it wasn't like a contest or a competition or anything. But it was like these people were possessed, and so they would send a camera crew to somebody's house, and then the shaman would perform a kind of ritual exorcism. Now, this was like a pretty popular show, like maybe 10 or 15 years ago on Korean TV. But I always felt uneasy about it, because I felt like you have a person who's mentally ill, and your solution for it is this metaphysical ritual. And I was just like, that person needs to be in a mental hospital. They're clearly schizophrenic or something. So I always had like a, you know, kind of a weird feeling about shamanism. Now, I still feel that way. Like, I still feel like I hope those people got some like psychiatric help on top of the shaman, you know, intervention. But I think I've opened up a little bit after doing a little research here. So I'm not such a cynic when it comes to this sort of thing. And I'll tell you why, because as I looked through some of these things, I started to see some religious patterns that kind of apply to our Western, you know, Christianity and maybe some other religions as well. And so anyway, the one that you're talking about, the Nadim Mudang, would be the northern province, northern Gyeonggi, Seoul, and going into Pyongyang. That was historically the area, and that's where most of the Mudang are, in Seoul now. And so when we think of Mudang, we think of like country, you know, and country folk. But actually, they just came to Seoul because that's where the people are. That's where you can, you know.
So I guess that would make sense, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about it, it's like that. I never thought about that, but that makes a lot of sense. Like, yeah, you often associate like the mystics as like, you know, the monk on the mountain, but it makes a lot more sense in the urban. Yeah, right. But it makes a lot more sense because it's a service.
Yeah. And back in the old days, you know, you would have traveled out to the outskirts of town to visit the shaman. Probably the Mudang probably lived, you know, a little bit outside of the, I don't know, the hamlet or whatever. But historically in Korea, the people, they needed the shaman, because the shaman is the person that blesses your little enclave, your little community in the past. So are we going to have a good harvest? Well, you better have the shaman perform the ritualistic gut that will bring a bounty of bountiful harvest. And so those are the kinds of things that the shaman would perform. So a shaman was considered low on the social hierarchy, if you're talking about but respected kind of behind the, I don't want to say like underground, like even the king and the queen would have a shaman, would visit the shaman, but their status in the society was very low, almost to the bottom of the hierarchy. So it's always been a very strange relationship with.
I think I've seen that with other shaman type religions elsewhere, where, because like shamanism, it's not like an official religion, right? And it's not the same way as like the religion. It's not the religion that the king and queen or most of the people practice. So it's like everyone has their own religion, Buddhism or whatever it happens to be, and then there's the shaman, and they're kind of like extra, and it's like, that's not our religion, but we still trust in it, we still believe in it, we still need them.
I think that's kind of funny because it's like, I've got my main religion, but if the shit hits the fan, I'm going to the shaman. Like
you gotta hedge your bet.
I'm in a pickle.
There's a lot of gods out there.
If you look across, I don't know a ton about religion and theology, but if you look at, when I look at the development of religions in the world, like if you guys read, I mean, I'm pulling this from like Yuval Harari. Do you know this guy? Sapiens,
oh yeah, sure. Okay.
And all this stuff. Okay. Like one part of that and one like one part Bill Bryce, and like, you know, these books that like these sweeping stories about the history of humans. If you look at like where animism, shamanism, and where this develops, it's like religion and spirituality was very personal, individual. And then organized religion, it's a totally different thing.
Totally different.
And so cultures, and it didn't happen in a linear fashion. I mean, it would seem so because we think of one as older, one as newer, and they are, but it's not linear, like across the world. So like when Buddhism came to Korea, it's pretty young compared to Buddhism like in Sri Lanka. So when it arrived, there were other spiritual practices that were happening. They were very vibrant, and one didn't supplant the other. They had no problem blending the two. And actually, this is just anecdotal, my experience. But one thing I noticed when I came here, I was surprised at how blended Christianity was here.
This is what
that
I'm
really
saying.
impressed me. Coming from northern Wisconsin, Catholic hub. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
I know
it's
exactly
like,
what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, there's like not a big argument about this subject. It's like, yeah, like my parents are Buddhist, I'm Catholic, so what? And you know, I go to the temple, and at the same time, I'll go to church on Sunday. Like,
yeah.
And it's not just I'm doing it to like please mom and dad. I'm actually bowing and praying. I'm still going to church.
I think there's still some conservative Christians. I think Buddhists are a little bit more open to that, like mixing and matching. But it depends on the type of Christianity, I think, too. I think for the most part,
some draw lines.
And especially like younger people are just more liberal and open-minded than older generations. This was really interesting. It says, I pulled this quote straight from the guy at the interview. Shamanism is not an organized religion per se, and some view it as primitive. He puts that in quotations. So a lot of people don't take it seriously in Korea. He says, but to me, the lack of hierarchy makes it even more legitimate. He says, I think most people worldwide, especially younger generations, have very little interest in religion because of its associations with power, repression, and so on. But I think that is a huge clue into why this has endured so long, is because it's not institutionalized. It hasn't been codified in written word. It's orally passed on from generation to generation. In fact, that has been criticized. But the Mudang, the lady that they were interviewing, she says that every ritual should be different and should be flexible and modified according to the needs of the client. And she says, I think they see their role as someone who establishes or restores balance to people's lives. So they're focused on just helping people, but they're not worried about like, oh, the ritual must be exactly the same as it was when my parents did it. And so that kind of
that's really interesting. I can really see how that would help its longevity as a religion as well, because I mean, as we know with so many other religions, like they borrow from here and there to keep it up with the times. Well, this is just constantly keeping up with the times, right? They're just trying to match with
that's
everything.
how I see it. I so malleable and so like I said, it's able to incorporate Buddhism right into it. Because how do you incorporate Buddhism into it? The woman that was interviewed in the article that I read, the Mudang, she inhabits one of her main spirits that she goes to. One of her primary sources of information is an ancient Chinese monk, a Buddhist monk. So she becomes the monk. The monk enters her body. Her physical mannerisms change. Her voice changes. She becomes this other person. I hate to, I don't want to diminish it by making this comparison, but if you've seen the movie Ghost, remember when Whoopi Goldberg, they jump inside of her? I mean, this is the same kind of, I'm sorry, that was a terrible, I shouldn't even mention that. Okay, I'm sorry.
No, I'm saying I don't remember, so long ago.
Oh, yeah, that movie, my movie reference is from the 80s, but anyway, so that's the interesting thing about the northern shamanism, we'll call it, north of the Han River. Now, if you go south of the Han River, you have a different type of shamanism, and this is believe they call it Dangul. Let me just make sure I got this right here. I put it in here. Let's see here. Dangul type shamanism. And I typed it into the translator. Dangul translates to regular Korean, which was interesting because this type of shamanism is hereditary. This is like your uncle you decide you want to become a Mudang. And so your uncle is a Mudang and your uncle trains you to become one. So it comes through family relationships. My grandmother is a Mudang. So now she's training me, her granddad. My mother didn't want to be one. Okay, no problem. But I want to be one. My grandmother trains me and I become a Mudang.
All right, so that's really different from what my girlfriend just told me over dinner. It's totally different.
This is the second kind. This is the Dangul type of shamanism, which is Gangwon, Gyeongsang, Chungcheon, and Jola. Those provinces practice this type of shamanism, and these shamans are not magical. They do not possess they do not become possessed by the spirit of an ancient monk or anything. What they do is they're priests, essentially. They're still intermediaries, but the same way like a Catholic priest is an intermediary. The Catholic priest is, I don't become, another person. I'm still just a priest, but I have studied this religion and I'm, and I know the rituals. And so essentially you learn the rituals. And so you learn a ritual for harvest. And so after years of training, you're Mudang and you're able to perform this ritual, this gut, for a good harvest. Or somebody comes to you and says, my daughter's out of control, what can I do? I have the perfect ritual for you. This is what we need to do. And so you're an expert, essentially. You're a priest, you're a theologian of the shamanistic religion, but it's very, it's not global. It's very, it's very, how can I say it?
Personalized.
It's like to the little town, the region, or the hamlet. So if you go to another town, there'll be another Mudang who might have a slightly different ritual. And so it's not, so it's very much passed down from family, and it's about the old village. And so it's all very relevant to, how they say like all politics are local, all Dangul type shamanism is local. It's about it's relevant only to the people in this local area, this little hamlet, this enclave where these people live. And so I could see that like Dangul type shamanism is kind of being usurped by the Seoul version, because that's if you want to say, it's kind of the sexier version of shamanism, right? Because you're actually
also just if we look at just practicality wise, that seems like it would become harder to control as your small hamlets become metropolises.
Exactly. Right. Because
you don't have a neighborhood shaman when your neighborhood is an apartment block of 50,000 people and there's another one. Like, it's harder to have that personalized, like, this is our town's shaman anymore. So it makes sense to have the more general northern shaman.
Jack, did you read about any of the rituals in particular? Oh yeah, I've there are maybe 4 or 5 that I'll talk
He's
about.
ready.
I just wanted to hit the. I just wanted to let people know.
Slow, man. This is awesome.
That was a great start.
Two different types of. Actually, there's another. So there's one more type, and I think we'll talk about Jeju because I don't want to leave Jeju out.
Yeah.
So Jeju shamanism is called Shinbong Type, and the Shinbong type of shamanism is associated with a specific set of gods, but they're through these like these tools, the implements, these like discs, and these. So basically, the shaman again is not inhabiting the spirit of anybody. The spirits of those gods are in the objects, these tools that are passed down and given to the shaman. And so, and you know how to use these tools correctly in a ritual, in a gut, that's going to have the desired effect. And so there's
all
like
about the artifacts.
Right. So there are these like amazing artifacts. I don't know if they can, I couldn't find anything about like whether they can make new ones or whether they're already created and passed down. But I think that the ability to make new implements, it has to be possible.
It's a
because
thing.
yeah, because then there'd be like a finite set of tools and everybody be fighting for collecting all of them, like, you know, like baseball cards, and I'm the king shaman, I have all the tools and there are no more tools. So I think they can be created, but the god, the spirit is held inside the tools, and the shaman knows how to use the tools. And so that's the Jeju version of shamanism.
That
which
one,
is really cool.
I'd love to know a little bit more. I know this is something that you probably don't know, and that it would take a lot of getting into, but that idea of creating new tools, I'd love to. I'm curious how that has changed. How the
right, like is it like a USB
changed.
Drive or something? Or,
exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, like in the past, it was, you know, like a sieve for, you know, or a fishing something, or, you know, whatever different implements. And these days, it's, you know, your smartphone or USB.
I don't think so. I think they would probably be kind of like little, you know, like you wouldn't know what it is, right? It'd be like a wooden disc or something with some kind of you know, writing on it.
So are they were the tools in this, are they tools, things that people used?
No,
like
no.
Gardening tool?
These I'm using tool. I'm saying they're tools for a religious, like,
okay.
They're objects.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so
okay.
yeah, and so there's a name for it too. It's called Mengdu. Mengdu is the name of the way they spelled it in English is Mengdu. But these are like sacred ritual implements, and the shamans are the gods are embodied in these tools. And so the Shinbong's task is to understand the divine message conveyed by their Mengdu, and to use the Mengdu to worship the gods. So they worship the gods using these tools, but they also have to be able to read the tools. So maybe it's like a bundle of sticks that you throw, and like how the sticks fall, that might give you some information. That's my guess. But I've
seen these. I've seen these outside of Jeju. I'm just looking right now online. This isn't only, it is like saying that it's definitely this whole article is all about it being in Jeju, but I've seen this here on the peninsula as well.
Oh, I guarantee it now, because of, you know, I'm thinking like, you know, 300 years ago, things didn't move at the rate, but now, you know, the country is so, you can go to Jeju in 45 minutes. Of course, I bet you could find Jeju Mudang, you know, Shinbong Mudang here in Seoul. You could find the southern, the Dongo type up here in Seoul. I think, but my understanding is that the Seoul, the native Mudang, is the one that's kind of most people are familiar with, at least just because I think because that's the most prominent type of shamanism in Seoul. And I think it's probably the most spiritual of it, because it's most interesting because the shaman actually becomes possessed. And so I found something really interesting, and I wanted to share it with you. The person, like in the interview that I read, the woman, her primary spirit was this Chinese monk, this ancient Chinese monk. But she said that in the interview that she was also visited by Jesus Christ. So she turned down Jesus and took a sorry about that. Took the ancient Chinese monk. And so when these spirits inhabit the shaman actually changes their, like I said, their physical mannerisms and their voice and everything. And there even one shot, like there's one example of because Douglas MacArthur was the general who stormed Incheon during the Korean War.
Right.
They've even inhabited General MacArthur's some shaman have taken General MacArthur as the spirit guide, essentially the primary spirit.
That actually kind of makes sense. It makes sense that they would turn down Jesus I mean, because it's just connecting with your audience, right? And the same thing with MacArthur. MacArthur is like a modern day Korean hero here, like
almost it's like a version of sainthood almost, right? Like what I mean, that would be like the shamanistic version of sainthood, right? I'm going to accept him as my,
if he's worth, exactly. It's someone that's badass enough and has enough sway and power that inhabiting this person or this spirit is
but I'm wondering, like, useful. if my Mudang has chosen Douglas MacArthur as her primary spirit, does he speak English like Douglas? Is he like, I got a message?
I was wondering that as well.
Yeah, like Harry Truman sent me a message, direct line, telegram, don't buy a green car. That's your, and that's the kind of like the kind of practical information that a Mudang would give to you. In the interview that I was reading, the guy, the Mudang that he visits keeps telling him, don't buy a blue car. Just don't buy a blue car. That's not, blue car, not for you. And so he's like, okay, I'll take that information with me. But it's interesting how like kind of small the advice is, and how specific it is, or how precise. Like, don't buy a blue car.
I just found one of the common that might be interesting to both you guys. Like, when you're walking around the city or anywhere in Korea and you see buildings that have like, the swastika that's usually associated here with like Buddhism, or, usually that's what we say. We think it's like either it's the derivative of like Hinduism that went to Buddhism. It's a symbol.
It's a reverse swastika, right?
Yeah. So you see this everywhere. Like in my neighborhood downstairs, I can walk through the market and there's like a little building that's got a swastika on it. Everybody's always told me that's like, maybe it's just my interpretation. Maybe they told me it was a spiritual place or something like this. What do you think that is? What do you think goes on in there? I thought it was like Buddhists.
Oh, is that a Mudang? Is that the
it's called a manja is the symbol as it's related. I mean, I'm just looking, this is Wikipedia 10 seconds. Ryan.
I didn't even see that.
What I'm learning, I think I'm learning is that when we see that on the streets here, that's called a manja, and that's indicative of that being a shamanic facility. That's not Buddhist.
Oh, okay. I always took those
kind of an eye opener if that's true. I always thought it was Buddhist. Yeah. Again, this is just one off me 10 seconds looking at Google. But it really makes you wonder, because when you see those buildings, you do not see necessarily other Buddhist iconography. No, you don't see a Dhamma wheel. You don't see any other iconography. It's always just the swastika. I wonder if it's more prevalent than we think, because that's everywhere. Every neighborhood has like a little shack in the village or somewhere, and there's probably like 5 of them right here in Huam.
This is what I think is that I think even like in polite conversation, some Korean people would deny believing in it, but then secretly they might go and seek the counsel of a Mudang because I think it's so strongly ingrained in the culture, right? It's been around for so long, even like Korean Christianity. How sometimes like you'll get these kind of more culty kind of like I don't know, like extensions of main Protestantism here. And so a lot of times those guys will be like, I inhabit, or in the spirit of Jesus is me. I'm Jesus Christ or whatever. Like, I think that's Mudang. Like that's where it comes from, that influence of like, the spirit has entered me. I am now the vessel to you, my
I don't think it's only about spirits coming in though, because I think one of the really common things that people go to the Mudangs for is name changes. Right? Yeah, like it's a really small, and they're probably not calling in a spirit for a name change. So I would assume that although calling in a spirit is one of the things they do, I don't think that they do that all the time. Like people just go in just to be like, yo, can you tell me my fortune?
Yes.
Right. That's one of the big things that people do. It's just fortune tellers and like, my name is wrong. Like my name doesn't match my fortune or doesn't match my fate. And they give you a new name. Like that's one of the common things that they do and on like a daily basis, probably.
Yeah.
Because I want to back up just one real quick there, because there was a comment you made, and I think it's relative. It's worth discussing, like the idea of, you know, we're three foreigners here talking about Koreans living in Korea, and
right.
I don't think it's necessarily that Koreans are shy to talk about the shamanism, maybe, but I also think there's a lot of blending going on, and there is in all religions. Like, I mean, I grew up Catholic, right? Kev, you grew up Catholic as well. So if you think about the saints,
I was an altar boy for a little while.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. So like all the saints are really prevalent in Catholicism, right? So the
feast
saints,
days. I used to get money on my feast days.
Yeah, right. But I mean, the feast days, I mean, aren't those like derivatives of, you know, the pantheon of gods? You know, it's kind of like the same thing. It's like we needed to have those same, you know, it is.
Well, like American Protestantism, I find is radically individualistic. It's about personal salvation, right? Which is like, I think that's a very American, you know, capitalist kind of. But I'm not getting into that. But
yeah, what the example I was trying to make is that I think the blending is so it's such a standard that we don't think about it as a separate thing. Like one of my favorite things, like I'm very interested in Buddhism in general, in meditation, and the history from which Vipassana meditation comes from. It's been something I've been digging into for just the last like 3-4 years. And so I've made some pilgrimages to Sri Lanka, and I've done retreats here. And when you're looking at Buddhism in Sri Lanka or India, you can see, or Myanmar, you can see something that more closely represents the origin of it. You can see it's I don't want to call it more pure, but when things travel, ideas travel, they're going to pick up and develop and work with what's there. They're not always just going to supplant it. They don't always just burn shit down and then build something new. I love it in Korea. Yeah, in Korea, one of my favorite examples, I think I've said in the podcast before, is when you go to temples here, usually not in the main Dhamma hall, but in one of the buildings, in the temple area, I think damn near every temple I've been to has this painting. You're going to find behind the altar or painted on the side with the stories, the allegories, what they call that. You'll see the guy with the white beard. It's the king of the mountain. The king of the mountain.
Right.
Okay.
King of the mountain.
Let's think of how non-Buddhist this is. Okay, this guy, he's the spirit of the mountain. He looks like the wise man on the top of the hill. He's got his long, white, beautiful beard. He rides a tiger. Right? So he gets on a tiger like a horse and he rides a tiger. So you can find paintings of him sometimes behind the altar. He's on the tiger. Usually the tiger's next to him in there, but you'll see the paintings on the side. It shows him in action. He's actually galloping along on top of the tiger. What the heck does that have to do with like what you think about when you think about Buddhism?
You're right.
Like, who is that guy? Why is he even featured here? And then when you look in the temples in Korea, there's so many other people featured. The dude behind me here, Dalma, really popular character, which we have a whole episode on him as well. But there's more going on than just like Buddha equals Buddhism.
Oh,
and
sure.
So,
right.
Yeah. So I wonder if it's not so much that, like, if you ask a Korean, like, I'm just, like I said, this thing I saw here with like the swastika indicating that it's shamanism going on in my neighborhood here. I wonder if it's not so much that I've been misled. It's just, it's assumed. It's like people are telling me it's Buddhist or it's religion. It's spiritual. It's Buddhist. It's, it's like this, it's dismissive. It's just like, yeah. It's religious thing. Chill out. Right. I think maybe more like this.
Right. I think I would agree with that. Yeah, I would, because I heard this quote somewhere. It's like culture eats ideology for lunch. Right. So you have this, this religion, this ideology, but the culture is going to destroy it. Whatever, it's not going to it's not going to be, you're not going to maintain it in its, purest form. And I don't think they even try in shamanism. They didn't codify any of this in written language. So what they have are these oral stories that they pass down from generation to generation. So if you guys would indulge me, I would like to tell you a little bit about these. So here's the main story. This is for the I guess we'll say like the native Mudang, the Princess Bardi narrative. This is like a really important narrative. This is basically like their Bible, but they don't write it down. They just pass it on. So there's different variations of the story, but you have Princess Bardi, who is usually identified as the patron goddess of the shamans. She is also referred to as the conductor of the souls of the dead, or the goddess of the Big Dipper. So that's these are some of her titles. So she's a big deal in in shamanistic religion. They would have to be familiar with the story of Princess Bardi. And so the story kind of goes like this. It's a queen gives birth to 6 daughters in a row. And then she has what they call it an auspicious dream. So she has like a good fortune dream or whatever. So she thinks, number 7, I got my son, I give the king, the prince, but it's a daughter. Boom, 7 in a row. The king and the queen are pissed off. They say, get rid of that girl, throw her out. And so Bardi actually means to throw away. Is that right, Kevin? We need like some body,
like the verb.
Body.
The verb for throw away is bodida.
Bodhi. Sorry, Princess Bodhi. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm pronouncing it wrong. I said Bodhi. I'm sorry. That's my my mistake. Sorry about that. Lack of Korean pronunciation skills here. Princess Bodhi. Yes. And Bodhi does to throw away. And so she's named as the throwaway baby. And I just wonder, does that ring any bells for your Catholic selves there? Old Testament biblical stories. Baby Moses.
Yeah, things tend to repeat, huh?
Yeah, write down. Or Joseph, the brother that they got rid of, they threw him away. So I'm starting to see some patterns emerge here. So anyway, the girl is rescued by a Buddha-like figure. So in this case, now the religion of Buddhism is influencing shamanism, because Buddha is even in the story as probably pre-Buddhism, it was like a god. And then it just became Buddha as the person who rescued her.
Over time, the rescuer changed. Probably.
Right, exactly. So the rescuer, so you can see how like Buddhism gets infused into the story. So Bodhi grows up, and she finds out that her parents are gravely ill, and they need something called the water from the Western Heaven. And in order to get the water from the Western Heaven, obviously, if you go back to Joseph Campbell, Hero's Journey, she's got to go through this horrible set of circumstances. So anyway, she's swimming, and Buddha says, do you think you could swim another 3,000 leagues or whatever, some ridiculous amount of distance? And Princess Bardi says, I will swim until I die. I will not stop to save my parents, even though they threw her away. They the king and the queen. So anyway, the Buddha gives her like a special lotus, and guess what happens? This is straight out of the Old Testament. Parting of the Red Sea. Boom, the water goes right up, and she's got a beeline straight to the magic flower and the magic water that she needs to bring back and heal her parents. Bardi gets there. Of course, there's a monster protecting the thing that she needs, but she says, hey, you probably want some sons. And the monster's like, yes, I do. So she gives him some sons, and
She
the
do.
monster gives her a special flower and the Western Heaven water, and she returns back, but she's too late. Her parents are dead. She gives
And
her
giving
parents,
sons takes a long time.
she opens the coffins and she gives them the flowers. They come back to life. She makes them drink the water and she saves them. And so this is the story. This is the hero's journey of the outcast who actually becomes the hero. I might have forgot to mention this, but the 6 sisters before her, the queen asked them to go. The king and queen said, "You go," and they all said no. Only Bardi is the only one that was willing to take the journey. And so that, this is the myth of this is like the kind of the scriptures of shamanism. This is what they anyway, that's the Princess Bardi narrative.
Nice.
On Jeju, you got the Chogong Bonpuri, which is a different story. It's a totally different narrative. And I'll just give you like the really short version of this. It's essentially this old couple cannot have children. And suddenly when they're like 50, they have a daughter. And so so that made me remember like my, Bible, Sunday school and stuff like that. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Abraham and Sarah story. They couldn't have children, and they were like 150 years old, and they still couldn't have children. So anyway, there's a lot of these like connections that I made here. Essentially, what happens is they have to go on a trip. They lock the daughter in a room, and she's wearing a chastity veil, and this monk comes by, liberates her, frees her. She goes off. She gives birth to 3 sons. These sons become servants for aristocrats. The aristocrats all go to Seoul to take the big test to become civil servants, and they all fail, but the 3 sons pass the test. So they actually get certified, which angers the aristocrats. And so the 3 sons go off to meet the father, who tells them that they will become Mudang, and he gives them these tools. And that's how the Jeju tool-based Shinbong
Nice.
Mudang started. So there's a whole story, a different backstory that's the most important for Mudang in Jeju. And so I know these stories are getting a little bit long on the vine here, so I'll try to
No, it's great, man. I'm loving it.
But yeah, so that's that was the Chogong Bonpuri, and then we have the Gong Shim, which is this was a legendary Goryeo dynasty princess who was struck with Shinbong. She got sick. She became a very famous shaman. So there was a very famous female shaman out of the Goryeo dynasty. And this one is really interesting to me because this is like, it smacks of like mono religion, it's the myth of Dangun is this myth.
I know that name.
Belief. Do you know that like the God would come from heaven, and this would result in the earth and heaven being unified, and God and human beings would be unified as well. And so that's, this is straight out of like the New Testament type of stuff, or Old Testament.
The Dangun thing is interesting. There's actually a so when I first came to Korea, if you remember back to episode 1, when we're talking about how we got involved in coming here, I worked for my first Hagwon that I worked at here. They sent kids to a camp in Sedona, Arizona, and because the Hagwon is kind of weird. It had some like culty things connected to it, but like the leader of that Hagwon / mini cult thing, he basically said that Dangun was like connected or resurrected or something in Sedona, because Sedona is a very spiritual place for a lot of new agey type people in the States as well.
Yeah.
And so actually Sedona is apparently a place where there's some Korean shamans who think that even Arizona has some influence there or something like that.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. That is fascinating. Yeah, I mean, it doesn't surprise me just from the research that I did that it doesn't, that they can you can create this, this religion is so malleable. And that's why I think that primitive is the wrong word for it, because actually, to me, religion that is able to endure for so long with an oral history and not codify things in written word is actually more sophisticated in many ways. The way I see it, at least they like
Right.
Mudang seem very relaxed, very, they're not, it doesn't seem to be a very judgmental. It's not,
if it is, a couple of benefits it has for longevity too, when you think about it, it doesn't have some hierarchical structure where like Mudang is a network that's it has an agenda to push. There's not much you can really criticize as long as it doesn't cause any individual harm. If it's not making people drink bleach or anything like this, it kind of functions as therapy. It's individualized. It's a counselor. At the very least, it's someone to listen.
Yep.
Society is always going to need that. We've transformed that into a million different forms to the point of now, psychotherapy, right? So why not? As long as it's not, as long as I'm not making a judgment on it. I am making no judgment. I'm saying as long as society sees no net harm and it has no agenda, it's going to just kind of persist because people need someone to talk to. It's the thing.
That's great. Yeah, because the shaman that they interviewed, the one that I read, she said, it's not a substitute for Western medicine. They're not going to say, come and see the shaman and now you don't need to go to the doctor. They would say, you need to go to the doctor. Western medicine is okay, but we can also do a ritual, or we can have a conversation. I can give you some advice. It doesn't always have to be a goot. A goot is like a big ordeal, but they're also, this woman said, well, sometimes somebody comes in and says, I want a goot. And she says, no, you don't want to spend that much money on it. You want to just, let's go to the mountain. Let's talk. You just need counsel. And so that is exactly what they're there for. Yeah. And
it also has some kind of interesting, I guess you call it like side effects, like how on a superficial level, because you have something like this persisting, there's certain behaviors that become possible. Like we talked a little bit about this in a previous episode. We were talking about body language. We talked about, like the things that are different, right? In the West, we shake hands. In the East, they bow, like this kind of stuff. So there's other things too that can kind of spill over because of these traditions, these undercurrents. Like my girlfriend unfortunately went to a funeral a couple months ago, and before I was leaving, she's like, "I need a bag of salt." And I was in the kitchen cooking at the time. I was like, "Okay," I had no idea. I'm just like tied up the baggie and it's like, "Here, get out of it." She takes off. She needed it for the funeral, and then when she came back to the house, she rings the doorbell, stays in the doorway. And she hands me the bag of salt. She's like, "I need you to throw this at me." And it was just kind of like a little bit of an eye roll. It's like, just freaking do it, So I'm like, "What? You really throw salt at you?" She's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna." And so I took a handful and I throw it like kind of at her face, and she spins around. I throw it at the back of her head. She shakes it out of her hair and she walks in the door. I said, "What the heck was that all about?" And she said, "It's." She goes, "It's like it's nothing. Nah. Like this, like nah.
Just never mind."
So,
yeah.
I'm like, come on. I mean, I'm from Wisconsin. Like we don't do that.
Right.
You gotta
we throw rice at a wedding, maybe a wedding,
well,
but
exactly. We throw rice. I mean, that's a different sort of thing. So,
right.
There's going to be some history for that too. So I said, I pressed her. I said, what was that really all about? And she's like, well, I guess it's like for it's to make sure that I don't track ghosts into the house, basically.
Okay. Yeah.
But it was just, it wasn't like, it's not like this super dead serious type of thing. It's just sort of like, yeah, that's what we do. That's what I do. That's just like throwing rice.
And I think it'd be kind of weird for somebody that maybe, I forget what you call that in Christianity, what's the communion, like eating the cracker and drinking the wine,
like transubstantiation, like
right.
Or
not just communion, I guess. Yeah. I was thinking just that ritual, the liturgy is different. But the meaning is behind it. I think if we're going to be Buddhist about it, are we looking at the finger pointing at the moon, or are we looking at the moon? Right. It's like a lot of times we're staring at the finger and we're calling it the moon, when the essence behind the practice, the liturgy, the ritual or whatever is the important thing. not the actual ritual, because it's probably in another hamlet, it's not salt, it's sugar, or it's, a different, depending on which mudang you're listening to.
And
So,
I hadn't thought of like the wedding and rice thing. That didn't even occur to me. And it totally, you can say, oh, they're so unrelated. Well, yeah, it's throwing food stuff, but,
right.
but your point is actually kind of good. It's like, I hadn't really thought of that. If you spend enough time and you think about it, you can trace it back to an experience that you grew up with. You can trace it back and be like, hey, that's not nuts,
No, and also the experience that we're living by doing communion or whatever is traced back to somebody who found, essentially had a religious moment, epiphany, doing that for the first time. It was like, oh, the first time I threw salt in that, and they had, the skies opened up and like, something amazing happened to them, and it changed their lives, transcendent moment in their lives. That's where these rituals come from, right? I mean,
yeah. It's a slight digression, but it's on this point. I think it's worth mentioning. It's one thing that I've found years of kind of bumming around, especially the Eastern Hemisphere here, pretty much mostly. When you see different religious traditions, I've been to both a wedding and funeral in Indonesia. All of us have seen, Lunar New Year celebrated in different places. That most of the rituals are very much in the same vein as communion. So we have a little piece of bread, we call that the body. We have some wine, we call that blood. All right, we're projecting our own imagination onto this thing, and we're doing this as a community, and it brings us together, and we have a spiritual experience because of this. It's contemplative. There's one example I've experienced where it was not like this. And this is something, if anybody's listening, if you're traveling in the Eastern Hemisphere, I highly recommend this. I think it just passed, is it November? Might be November. I think it's just after Halloween. It's called Taiposang. You can look it up online. Taiposang. It's a Hindu festival that's in Kuala Lumpur, north of Kuala Lumpur in the Batu Caves. This is a blood ritual. This was the first time I saw religion with fangs. Like this
Wow.
is and it's a different sort of thing. And that's another way of having a religious experience is, and it's much more individualistic. So to tie it back to what we're talking about, when I saw Taiposang, so picture Taiposang, if you're not going to take the time to look it up, it's real simple to describe. Imagine you are an adherent of this faith and you choose to have this meaningful experience. So what you do is you go to a temple in Kuala Lumpur in the main city. You begin fasting. I think they fast for 72 hours, and they take these big hooks, and you've probably seen these pictures. They hook them into their skin, and they have they're like, a lot of times they have oranges and stuff hanging on them.
Okay.
A lot of people have like it looks just like an arrow stuck through one cheek and coming out of the other.
Yeah, I've seen this before.
Literally blood coming out of their mouths. It is, and they walk. It's like a walk of penance is what it looks like. And they walk up Batu Caves, which is a few miles north of the city. And there they pour coconut milk over. This is a long time ago. It was like a decade ago I watched this, but I was not prepared for it. One of my friends that I had met there who was Malaysian, he's like, hey, it's Taiposang this weekend. Aren't you going to go and join the festivities and watch? And I said, I don't know what that is. He's like, oh, you're coming. So we went and saw it, and it just blew my mind. The reason I'm mentioning this is related to what you're talking about, how the religious ceremony, these things we're doing, they come from someone having a religious experience. Yeah. At some point, the body and blood of Christ, it kind of was the body and blood of Christ. And even if you can't like pinpoint the event, I mean, we can talk about what most Christians believe, which is that the body, the cracker and the juice, it's representing that event that really happened for Christians, right? And there's this belief that really happened, and we're reliving it through that. I wonder if Taiposang is kind of like where those traditions, it's like still those origin moments happening. People are having deeply spiritual experiences, and those could become ritualized to the point that we have, malas and, crackers and, Jeju, totems and things like this.
Right.
It's fascinating.
It's totally fascinating. Like I guess the metaphor would be like the in Christianity, the cross is the intersection between the divine and the mortal. Like that's the intersection that we're celebrating. On Jeju, those items, those ornaments, or those totems are the intersection of the spiritual world and the earthly world. I mean, this is everything we're talking about here is about that. Is that intersection between the kind of unknown metaphysical and the earthly. And so I'm not so sure the vehicle is the important thing. You know what I mean? Like when it comes to the like a real true religious experience. And so that's why this kind of blew my mind open just studying about this. And are you guys interested in the different kinds of gut? If I do it really quickly here, we got a little bit more time. Man. I think
we could turn this into another podcast.
This thing has gone on like
channel. This is great.
I was scared this was only going to last like 5 minutes or 20 minutes or something. But,
you could probably teach an entire university course on this.
This is
I'm taking
it's
notes.
So fascinating. I just couldn't. So there's the gut rites are can be characterized by rhythmic movements, songs, oracles, and prayers. And these rites are meant to create welfare, commitment between the spirits and humankind. So if you're having problems, the problem is that there's some spiritual interference, something's out of balance. And so you need to bring your life back into balance. And so if it's a serious problem, we can help you. And so the native gut is the one that I think is, if you Google Mudang and you see like them wearing the really ornate clothing. And so, and they wear multiple costumes, and the ritual can go on for all day long. And what the Mudang is doing is inhabiting the spirit, like we said before, of their primary spirit sources, which could be multiple sources. So, like the ancient Chinese monk and another god can enter. And basically what they do is they will usually argue with the god. Like the god is not satisfied. The god's like, your clothes are terrible. Like, that's not good enough for me. Oh, well, this is the spread, like only, blah, blah, blah bottles of soju. So there's like this dialogue going on. And then Mudang is like apologizing. Oh, I know, I don't pray enough. I know I don't spend enough time. And so finally, after this negotiation goes on and on.
Is this the Mudang kind of effectively talking to themselves?
Yes, exactly.
God, right? Yeah.
Right. It's a conversation between the spirit and the Mudang, and on your behalf, because we're not Mudang, so we're not able to inhabit or spirits are not able to inhabit us. So this negotiation is going on between the Mudang and the spirit. And sometimes what they'll do is they'll even sharpen knives and they'll cut fruit, and then they'll dance on the blades of the knives. Like they'll put on the and not get hurt.
I saw something about that really briefly in one of the videos that I was watching as well, but they didn't really go into that part or show it. So
it's messed up, man. Like somehow they're able to, do this. I mean, I would say, is it a trick? Possibly, probably. I'm not saying it's magical, but it's one of the ways that they prove to people is like, look, I'm Mudang. I can dance on knives and I won't even cut my feet. So walking on hot coals, in some, I don't know, Samoa or something. I mean, aren't there rituals like that and Pacific Islanders? Right. Yeah. Like Tahiti or something. We've seen it before. But it just reminds me, it's the same thing. It's like, watch me do this thing where I should hurt myself, but I'm fine. And this is evidence to you that I'm actually communing with the gods right now. So that's the native gut. That's the big one. But there's also the Dodang gut, and Dodang gut is a communal rite common in central provinces. And this one is for like I think this one is for like prosperity in a village. So bring our village prosperity. And so the Mudang will do this in maybe like every year in the spring or in the autumn, in the fall. They'll have a Dodang gut Adorangut.
Like around the harvest time, maybe, or
That's what
planting
I think.
time in the
Yeah,
spring.
yeah. Or in spring, like this will be a great harvest. So,
Right,
you know,
exactly.
we can summon the spirits to bring a good harvest. Sitgimgut, Sitgimgut is this is a spiritual rite meant to cleanse the spirit of a deceased person. And so in the Korean belief is that when somebody dies, their body cannot enter the world of the dead because of an impurity of spirit. And so the Sitgimgut washes away the impurity. And so if you really believe in this stuff and your relative dies, you're going to cough up the bucks for a Mudang and say, okay, I'll do this, you know, solid for my relative that passed away, because I don't want them stuck in, you know, what essentially is purgatory or whatever for, you know, millennia or whatever. So they perform this rite, and, you know, I mean, this stuff is not exactly the most original, right? I mean, like I think this is, we find this in cultures all over the planet.
Oh yeah,
And so yeah,
Of course.
I think what comes to mind is like India and the Nile, you know, where they're washing the bodies, right? If I'm not mistaken, or I could be wrong about that, but you know, Hinduism or something like that. Oh, sorry, what was it?
The Ganges.
Oh, Ganges,
Yeah, the
right?
Nile
Thank you.
is Egypt.
That's right. Yes, I'm on the wrong. I'm in the neighborhood, but
That's
I'm in
all
the
right.
wrong area. Yeah. Thank
It's a
you.
it's a big river.
I had a question. And I wanted to put it in here. Kevin, this is a question for you, because my girlfriend just mentioned this during dinner. One last thing she mentioned, because I just asked her, I said, hey, what's interesting about shamanism in Korea that you can like throw at me while we're like eating our beans and rice? And she said that, you know,
And then she throws some salt at you instead of throwing the question. Sorry.
like you know, like the ancestor worship is a big thing here, of course. Like everybody knows,
Yeah, of
like,
course.
right. So Kevin, you've actually live in a Korean household. So you've actually participated in this with like laying the spread, the food, right?
Oh yeah, we go out like every year and to celebrate, or not celebrate, but to, what's the word for it? Like when just not celebrate, but on the death anniversary of Grandma and Grandpa, we go out to their grave and, you know, take them some drink and bow at the grave, stuff like that. I mean, it's really simple, but yeah.
What about like Solna? Like, don't you have a spread?
Yeah. Oh yeah, same. It's the big Chuseok spread. It's the same big spread,
Right,
but we
right,
do
okay,
also set out like the pictures of Grandma and Grandpa, and there's also, I don't know what it says because it's in Hanja, it's the Chinese characters, but there's like a little like plaque that has some Hanjas there, and yeah, we do like a little mini ritual for that as well. I bow for it and all of that.
So this is my question. So this I was familiar with. I've seen this. I've never been there for the day of, but I've come like shortly thereafter and seen. And I've also benefited from getting like the leftover fruit and stuff and food,
which is great.
Yeah, it is great. So yeah, I got all like the premium pears. It's awesome. And apples.
Korean pears, best fruit ever.
Yeah. Well, when they're good. When they're not good, nah. But when they're good, oh, what is it called? Yakon. Okay, that's another episode. We'll talk about food another time. I learned about yakon, which is a root that tastes like a pear. It's bizarre. Like how many years have we lived here? I'm learning a new vegetable, like crazy. Anyway, what I want to ask you, Kev, what she told me, I did not know this, is that during that ceremony, there's a side table, and this table gets equal emphasis. It gets just as much food. It gets just as much attention, I guess you'd say. And that's not for any of the ancestors. That's for the god of the house. That's how she put it.
We don't do that one.
The god of the house. So you want to appease the god of the house. And it's not a small thing. She was like, yeah, she's like, if you give 3 fish over here to your ancestors, the god of the house gets 3 fish. You don't do this one?
No, that one, we only have the one. Maybe our house is too small for it. I don't know. I'll have to ask about it later. But no, we only have the one table for.
Her mom's from the same neighborhood as your mother-in-law.
Yeah, I think we've said that before. We just do the main spread for the ancestors, and then I mean putting food outside for them as well. But that's still just for the ancestors. There's no god of the house table.
But appeasing a spirit like that does really smack of like shamanism, though. You know, like
for sure.
And I feel like her mom Her mom's very serious about Buddhism. We go to the temple. I kind of have to bow with her, and we go through, and I very much enjoy it. She's just very enthusiastic about her spirituality. But I get the impression that she takes things more seriously with perhaps what is shamanism. Mm-hmm. Like, what's an example? Like
you said a couple of other things as well. Like, I've never seen any shamanistic stuff like, the salt things like that. I've never seen that in any of the things that my mother-in-law does.
Do you guys
it's
have
much more just straight Buddhist things.
Yeah. Do you guys have any other like house rules though? Like I'm trying to think of some other ones that are like the feng shui ones, like you can't have plants that are taller than you.
No, I've got a plant that's taller than me.
You can't have a mirror like we had a large stretch mirror that faced the door. So when you opened up the front door, you looked at the stretch mirror, and her mom said we had to move it.
It's funny. I've got a mirror taller than me, and or a plant taller than me, and a mirror right in my entryway.
Well, my mother-in-law is pretty hardcore Christian, so she kind of denounces the Mudang stuff. But the thing I wonder is, like, people like that. I mean, how much of an influence does Mudang have on them that they don't even? That's subconscious. That's cultural. I bet there are things, right? I mean, just the ways that it influences your life, where you maybe just by virtue of growing up in Korea,
I wonder about small superstitions. Like one really small one, I don't know if you guys have run into, is in your houses, I don't know about it. Like in my house, between the doorways, we don't have anything, but in my in-laws' house just downstairs, there's a door frame that on the floor as well, like where the door would close. Stepping on the door frame is a bad idea, and I'm not exactly sure why.
You can't do that in a temple. You're not supposed to step on that part. Every like Buddhist temple, is that right, Ryan? Like when you take off your shoes, and then at least in Thailand, when I lived in Thailand, they all have that kind of like there's like a barrier. It's like a couple inches.
These barriers are even just smaller. This is just a tiny door frame in the house, of course. It's not something big, but it probably comes from the same thing.
I do know in Thailand, it's very disrespectful.
When I tie my shoes, I put my foot on that edge when I tie my shoes, and my girlfriend yells at me for it. I always thought it was just because I was being dirty, because it's like you're half on the floor. I don't know.
I think that one is because you're being dirty.
Yeah, probably.
that's different from the door frame, but it's possible that it's connected as well. But there's
now we're conflating religion and habits.
Well, a lot of these bad habits. I mean, that's the thing, is these kind of superstitions are, they're ancient. Like stepping on the door frame. Where does that come from? That's hundreds of years old, probably, where it first started. And now it's just something so automatic that one time I was just standing in the door frame because there was a lot of family around for one of the holidays, and I was just standing there because there wasn't a lot of space for me elsewhere. And my mother-in-law just really quickly poked me and said, "Get off the door." Just really small things about that, or maybe even like where the chopsticks are supposed to be on this side, or the soup is supposed to be on this side. Like, I wonder how many of these things even Korean people don't even know where they came from. Like, why is it this way? And maybe
I bet most of the time we don't know.
It's easy to like make it sound mysterious when it's other, but like, oh man, years ago I did a lecture I used to keep in rotation for class, looking at trying to find anomalies that either Koreans wouldn't be so much aware of, or I wouldn't be so much aware of in both of our cultures, And one of the examples I would always use is neckties. So like, why do we wear a necktie? That's a pretty weird piece of clothing when you think about it. It doesn't really serve a functional purpose. In fact, it's kind of dangerous. You're tying a rope around your neck. I mean, for real, it's not very practical. It's kind of dumb. Right. And there's plenty of theories of where it comes from. And the one that's very popular you could find online, and I introduced to my classes, with the caveat, hey, this is just a story. But one of the popular ideas is that it used to be something that a soldier might wear, so that if someone went to take a knife to their throat, it might ensnare and entangle with the fabric. So imagine it more like an ascot. Is that the right word?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it would be like this. And so it'd be like between your armor or something, but lets you have movement, but it protects you from like a quick blade or something. And then later, became elongated, became part of, regalia for, aristocrats and shit like this. And now becomes a symbol of, business. And, isn't that kind of interesting? And business is kind of like battle or something. Who knows? I'm getting into this fun discussion about it. But we never think about that. I wear a tie. I mean, not the last 2 years, but but normally I wear a tie every day for work. I never think about this crap.
Yeah,
it's kind of,
there's absolutely no functional purpose for a tie now that I think about it. It's just
ridiculous,
useless. Yeah, it's terrible. Yeah.
Dangly thing hanging in front of you. It's like
a lot of superstitions come from really interesting old ancient things.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of the end of my my little spiel about shamanism. But I don't know. I
cool stuff.
Yeah, it was really opened my eyes to the culture in a way that I had never really thought about it, and that finding out.
What's really interesting about it, to kind of sum up, is just how it really is so prevalent and everywhere, just even in these small little things. Like, I mean, how many times I've had students tell me that they got their name changed, and I'm like, oh, you got your name changed? Like, yeah, we went to a person and they gave me a new name. I'm like, wait, what? And I never realized at the time that the person that they were going to was a shaman who, is choosing their name based on the stars or the spirits or whatever it is. And, this is just a common thing that I've had people tell me, and it's just like, oh yeah, got my name changed. No big deal. My old name just didn't fit me anymore. And it's like, oh, cool. And that is. That's just in, a very common thing. It's not weird. It's not strange. It's not even a religion necessarily. It's just something that's there.
Well, I guess in summary, it's not organized religion, which is, I think, what makes it so kind of cool is that how individualistic it is. Like it's or disparate it is. And I did come across this quote in there that said that Mudang do not work well together because they'll argue about which god is the best one to advise in this situation. So they really can only fly solo. Really, if you're a Mudang, you don't want to team up with another Mudang, because you'll be arguing all day long about, this this tool is better than that one to solve this problem. And so you want to just have be on your own. So, and maybe that's what has helped it endure for so long. Cause I mean, it's still, they're telling the same story they were 1,000 years ago. They just, little details change here and there, but it's I don't know, trace it back to like the hero's journey. It's human. It's so cool. And
this was great. I think I learned a lot. I think it's got me to get a little interested in this stuff again. It's been a long time since I've given it a thought. It's nice to be refreshed. You live here for so long, and that's kind of one of our themes, right? The three of us always talking about how we're like foreigners that have been here for a long time. This is like this type of fascination. It really brings me back to when I arrived here. Like I want to get into it again.
I want to recover that, like that feeling of when you first come into, I remember walking with my friend down by the Han River, and we just stopped and had this kind of like epiphany. He just turned around and he goes, we live in Korea, like in Seoul, just look around. And I hadn't, when's the last time that you just did a kind of, 180 scan across the horizon to see where you are, it's an interesting, very interesting place, and it has a rich culture, and I think shamanism plays a much bigger role than I ever knew it did. And so I'm glad we got to talk about this with you guys. And
well, thanks for sharing.
Yeah, no problem, man. It's my pleasure. You guys, listeners out there, this is a long one here. If you can hang in there for the especially the Princess Bardi part that started to drag on a little bit. I apologize for that. But you can find us on all the major platforms. If you want to download the podcast, we're on Spotify, we're on Pandora, we're on Stitcher. You can find us, you can go right to our website, which is thesoulpatch.com, SEOUL patch, PATCH.com. For your one-stop shop, you can get you can find the YouTube channel there. You can find you can download us from Red Circle, and we'll
I like to pay a couple respects to the people that made me what I am today.
Joining us. Bye, everybody.
All right. Got gear.
Kiss all my love. Kiss all my love.
The quiet man.
Kiss all my love. Kiss all my love.
Dopamine. Jim.
Kiss all my love. Kiss all my love. Kiss all my love.
The brain.
Kiss all my love. Kiss all my love.
Hey, Bobby.
Let the bass go.
call me a dominant.